the hidden cost to the economy. When you add up the meetings, the duplicated roles, the managerial layers, and the bureaucracy that props it all up, what you get isn't just workplace frustration, it's an economic sinkhole. Every hour spent maintaining illusions instead of creating value translates directly into lost output. Economists have started measuring it in staggering terms: the corporate bureaucracy tax. According to research, the average employee spends around 28% of their week performing bureaucratic chores. Nearly a day and a half wasted on internal noise. Scale that across a national workforce, and the bill climbs into the trillions. That's labor paid for, but not producing any real goods, innovation, or progress. Think of how that plays out in prices you actually pay. When a company spends more on unnecessary staff and processes, those costs don't vanish, they get passed on. It's why hospital bills, college tuition, and even basic consumer goods keep creeping upward. In higher education alone, administrative bloat has pushed tuition to record highs. Positions that once supported academics now exist to manage compliance paperwork or internal analytics dashboards. The same dynamic repeats in healthcare. Armies of billing administrators matched against armies of insurance adjusters, all processing forms that cancel each other out. The end result: patients and students pay for a war of paperwork that creates no net value. On a broader scale, this inefficiency drags national growth. Between 2002 and 2025, U.S. GDP hovered around modest gains, averaging near 2% per year. Meanwhile, corporate profits ballooned, not because companies became more innovative, but because cost-cutting and price inflation masked stagnation. True productivity, output per hour worked, barely moved. Economists point to automation as the fix, but here's the irony. Those systems often end up feeding new bureaucracies. Instead of reducing staff, companies layer AI oversight teams, audit committees, and data compliance officers on top. Each innovation gets followed by guardians to monitor it, turning potential time savings into permanent overhead. Call it irony, call it tragedy, but this bureaucracy feeds on economic oxygen. Every duplicated approval or meaningless report diverts resources that could fuel innovation. In industries like manufacturing and tech, that lost capital could fund research or better equipment. In education, it could lower costs for students. But instead, money gets trapped in self-referential cycles of meetings and reviews. You can literally trace the slowdown in global productivity to these internal waste systems. When large organizations, public or private, carry more administrative weight than creative muscle, economies crawl. Now, some defenders argue that these administrative layers provide stability. They say that without process, chaos reigns. But look at the numbers again. In Latin America, bureaucratic burdens on medium-sized businesses alone account for roughly 13% of GDP. That's not avoiding chaos, that's institutionalized drag. The same pattern exists in the US, though less visible. Slow approvals, duplicated compliance, and corporate rituals that eat the time of people who could be inventing or producing. It's an invisible brake pedal pressed halfway down all the time. We also pay for this in wages. When companies absorb so many resources into non-productive functions, there's less left for the people doing the real work. Frontline builders, engineers, and service staff shoulder the weight of returning value while watching middle management expand. It's why wages for production and non-supervisory roles have barely kept pace with inflation, even as corporations boast record headcounts. The money exists, it's just trapped in layers of administrative fat. If even half of those wasted salaries were redirected toward productive functions or employee compensation, average wages could rise dramatically without raising prices at all. And yet, the system resists any correction because bloat benefits those who oversee it. Investors and executives love showing elaborate hierarchies. It signals scale, stability, and control. Simplified structures look risky. That perception distorts market behavior. Analysts reward complexity by valuing companies with thicker management charts, assuming bigger oversight equals lower uncertainty. So firms invest in appearances, more metrics, more departments, more proof that everything's under control. The market ends up subsidizing inefficiency because it looks like diligence. Consider also the cultural side effects. When workers spend more than a quarter of their week on bureaucratic upkeep, they disengage. Engagement rates globally hover around 23%, meaning 3 out of 4 employees are psychologically checked out. That disengagement is expensive. Gallup estimates the global cost of lost productivity between $400 billion and nearly $9 trillion per year. Those aren't abstract figures. They equal the GDP of entire continents. Whether you work in banking, retail, or logistics, every disengaged worker adds friction to the system. A disengaged manager multiplies it. There's a hidden inflation nobody talks about: bureaucratic inflation. It doesn't raise the price of goods directly. It raises the cost of time. As projects take longer to execute, businesses lose momentum. That lost speed is why you wait months for repairs, approvals, or product launches that should take weeks. Every stalled decision is a hemorrhage of potential value. Economists can measure capital, labor, and technology inputs, but what's harder to see is how many hours vanish into internal standstills. Those are hours humanity never gets back. Meanwhile, workers bear the personal cost. When inefficiency piles up, executives demand efficiency initiatives. Departments shrink, but the meetings remain. Suddenly, fewer people carry the same bureaucratic load. It's like cutting the crew of a rowboat without reducing the size of the boat. Everyone rows harder just to keep afloat. The effort doesn't produce movement, it just maintains illusion. And from the outside, analysts call it productivity growth while burnout spreads beneath the surface. It's tempting to view this as just another corporate annoyance, but there's a moral dimension too. An economy built on wasted potential teaches generations to equate motion with merit. We measure work in hours logged rather than outcomes achieved. People spend decades climbing ladders that lead nowhere tangible, polishing systems that recycle themselves. That's not just inefficiency, it's theft of purpose. Every hour an intelligent person spends managing nothing is an hour civilization loses to paperwork. What if that were reversed? Imagine trimming even 10% of administrative drag. Those billions could re-enter circulation as investment in real production, green energy projects, infrastructure, medical research, education access. Instead of paying for departments that pass status updates, we could pay for innovation that lifts quality of life. Engineered properly, the economic boost would dwarf most stimulus packages. Efficiency isn't just good management, it's an untapped growth strategy. Yet despite knowing all this, companies rarely act. Partly because no one wants to be the first to admit how much time and money are wasted. Flattening structures sounds revolutionary until you have to eliminate jobs tied to prestige. Plus, inefficiency hides unemployment. It's politically safer to overemploy than to face layoffs, even when those roles add nothing. So rather than reform the system, leadership doubles down on optics. More performance dashboards, more audits, more committees promising transformation that recycles the same dysfunction with new branding. Ultimately, the hidden cost to the economy is that we've built prosperity around activity instead of achievement. We celebrate busyness as growth, paperwork as proof, and compliance as creativity. But all the dashboards in the world can't disguise the flat line beneath them. Real wealth doesn't come from emails and meetings. It comes from turning human potential into something valuable. And our current structure spends most of that potential maintaining itself. Every pointless report, every redundant manager, every overbuilt process is a subtraction from progress disguised as diligence. That's the real hidden cost, an entire civilization bleeding momentum to protect the comfort of its hierarchies. So when you wonder why prices climb, why progress stalls, or why your paycheck lags behind your effort, remember this. Inefficiency isn't accidental. It's designed. It protects those who profit from predictability and punishes those who produce real change. And that knowledge, the realization that the system values control over creation, isn't just economic insight. It's a reckoning. Because once you see the drain clearly, pretending not to costs more than money. What it costs is meaning. Section 4, the managerial myth. Here's where it gets personal for anyone sitting between the front line and the boardroom. Corporate America has built an entire religion around the myth of the manager. The idea that leaders exist to shape, refine, and direct productivity. But peel back the layers and you'll find something uncomfortable. Much of what's called leadership today is really number management. The myth says managers drive performance. The data says they mostly measure it. Their success is often defined not by the impact their teams create, but by how large those teams appear. The bigger the empire, the bigger the bonus. This obsession with empire size starts early. Promotions are tied to headcount, not outcomes. Executives are rewarded for how many people they supervise, not for how efficiently those people perform. It's a game of surface area. To move upward, you need visible scope, and scope is built by adding bodies, not by doing more with fewer. A department that hums along smoothly and quietly risks being seen as irrelevant. Managers learn fast. If no one's complaining, invent a crisis. Build a new project around it. Secure resources to fix it. Then declare the problem solved by your oversight. That circular logic defines modern leadership. Performance metrics often measure participation rather than progress. Think of quarterly reviews filled with talk about cross-functional collaboration, strategic agility, and operational excellence. These phrases sound like outcomes, but describe nothing tangible. They translate into slide decks, benchmarks, and color-coded dashboards that could be recycled across any company in any industry. They exist to signal motion, proof a leader is leading, even when the underlying work is static. Bonuses amplify the charade. When your compensation depends on quarterly optics, you prioritize what can be displayed over what can be delivered. So leadership becomes stage management. Budget underspent? Quickly schedule a training initiative. Fall short on engagement numbers? Launch a survey campaign so you can publish improvement percentages next quarter. It's an endless loop of self-justification because the reward system values visible steadiness over invisible progress. If something truly changes, risk increases, and risk threatens comfort at the top. That's why trimming bureaucracy never lasts. Each wave of organizational simplification begins with dramatic org charts but ends in rebranding. Vice presidents become category leads, directors become strategy partners, and the same people occupy the same spaces with new names. The illusion of renewal satisfies shareholders without reducing the stack. Managerial myth thrives on change that changes nothing, because actual simplification reveals how redundant many roles are. The psychology behind it runs deep. For many leaders, a shrinking team feels like personal failure. A leaner organization suggests you weren't important enough to justify manpower. So leaders unconsciously inflate staff levels or projects to validate their identity. Psychologists call this status preservation behavior, protecting self-worth by maintaining signs of rank. It's the corporate version of peacocking, displaying management muscle to ward off irrelevance. Entire review processes exist to feed that insecurity, turning leadership into image maintenance. Inside that insecurity lies something darker: managerial protectionism. It's the practice of trapping subordinates beneath paperwork to maintain control. Managers know that as long as their employees are buried in forms, approvals, or status updates, they rely on the manager to interpret the chaos. The result is dependency. Workers can't operate autonomously because every move requires validation. That dependency keeps the hierarchy breathing. The manager stays central, indispensable, and therefore safe. Look at modern performance systems. Instead of measuring contribution, they measure compliance, how well employees follow instructions, update metrics, or attend check-ins. Autonomy is quietly punished because self-sufficiency threatens the chain. Even innovation must be framed as aligned creativity. Progress only counts if it flows through proper reporting lines. So the mythology of leadership recasts control as empowerment. You're told your manager guides your success, but the guidance mostly consists of translating bureaucracy into slightly friendlier words. The hypocrisy becomes glaring during crises. When profits dip, organizations promise accountability. But accountability rarely climbs upward. Frontline workers face layoffs, while upper management delivers glossy transformation strategies, explaining how these cuts are part of a visionary reset. The leaders who nurtured inefficiency are the ones trusted to fix it. That self-recycling of authority protects reputation while displacing blame downward. In meetings, you'll hear sentences like, "We're all responsible for outcomes," which really means, "You're all responsible for outcomes. We're responsible for narratives." Economically, this arrangement siphons energy from the most productive corners of the company. Studies show that middle managers spend nearly a full day per week on administrative coordination alone: emails, budget reporting, compliance tasks. That's over 50 workdays a year consumed by internal oversight rather than external value creation. Those hours are financed by the labor of people beneath them, doubling the waste. Every dollar spent managing paperwork is a dollar not spent on innovation. Yet the system treats that oversight as heroic effort, not drain. The absurdity compounds when AI enters the picture. Automation should liberate managers from low-value supervision. Instead, it often becomes another metric generator that requires, of course, more managers to interpret it. The hierarchy adapts to preserve itself. We need a team to oversee the Automation Council. Progress doesn't reduce oversight, it upgrades it. The managerial myth mutates to fit new technology, like a parasite adjusting to a new host. All of this would be comic if it weren't so demoralizing. For those lower in the chain, the myth translates into constant scrutiny without support. You're told leadership drives culture, but culture feels like a filter that screens authenticity. You learn to modulate enthusiasm. Too little looks disengaged, too much looks naive. The safest expression is controlled optimism, the language of the meeting room. Every word calibrated to signal competence, but conceal opinion. It's exhausting performance art directed by the myth that someone above knows what they're doing. And maybe that's the cruelest twist. Many managers are victims of the same illusion. They're under pressure to prove relevance to people above them, who in turn scramble to impress another tier. It's turtles all the way up. Each level mirrors the anxiety of the one beneath. The myth sustains itself because everyone is both actor and audience, clapping for the performance they secretly suspect is hollow. But the psychological toll of that performance trickles downward most. The authentic creators, the ones shipping products, fixing problems, serving customers, get smothered by oversight while carrying the guilt of underperforming in a structure deliberately designed to slow them down. They leave meetings feeling inadequate, convinced they're missing some strategic insight their superiors see clearly. In truth, those superiors are often just improvising confidence to hide confusion. The system runs on that mutual hallucination. Everyone pretending someone else understands the plan. This is why so many capable workers eventually burn out or tune out. You can't maintain meaning inside a feedback loop built on optics. Projects become vehicles for visibility, not vehicles for progress. Leaders chase promotion prerequisites instead of purpose. Entire industries mistake risk avoidance for wisdom. It's no coincidence that engagement levels sink as bureaucracy grows. When purpose thins, motivation follows. By now, you might recognize the cycle. Inflated roles, protectionist control, fear of simplification, and the endless theater of leadership metrics. It's a loop that keeps itself alive through self-reinforcing stories. The myth tells workers that guidance ensures stability, when in reality that guidance often manufactures dependence. The irony? Every time a company launches an initiative to empower employees, it usually builds another management layer to oversee that empowerment. So what begins as cost control ends as control addiction. And in that addiction lies the truth. Corporate leadership isn't broken because it's incompetent. It's broken because the myths that sustain it are profitable. Control creates predictability, and predictability comforts investors. Purpose doesn't, but comfort comes at a price. The people doing meaningful work pay it through frustration and the slow loss of belief that their effort matters. And that feeling, that quiet, creeping doubt that your job doesn't matter after all, isn't just boredom. It's the start of a psychological unraveling that has reshaped the modern workforce. Because when belief dies, productivity follows. In the next section, we'll look at that collapse more closely. The identity crisis spreading through every silent cubicle, the mental strain of pretending that meaning still exists, and why no one tells you that despair is actually rational. Section 5. The psychological toll of useless work. There's a particular kind of fatigue that comes from pretending your job matters when it doesn't. It's not physical tiredness or even the stress of long hours. It's the slow erosion of meaning. You wake up motivated, but by noon you're drained, not from exertion but from the absurd effort of keeping up the act. This is the silent epidemic of modern employment. The depletion that comes from performing usefulness inside a system built on waste. Across workplaces, surveys show over half of workers feel significant stress from job insecurity. Yet paradoxically, many of those insecure roles could vanish tomorrow without anyone noticing a dip in output. That contradiction messes with the human psyche. You're constantly told your position is vital, while everything around you suggests it's expendable. The result is chronic anxiety rooted in cognitive dissonance. You know your efforts add little value, but you can't admit it without risking survival. Psychologists call this moral injury, the internal conflict between what you know to be right and what you're forced to do. Soldiers experience it during unethical orders. Office workers feel it in smaller doses when they spend months pushing initiatives that achieve nothing, repeating slogans no one believes. You end the week with that hollow ache, not pride, not satisfaction, just the uneasy sense that your contribution was cosmetic. Over time, that hollowness metastasizes into burnout, depression, and cynicism. For younger workers especially, this hits hard. They entered the labor force believing effort leads to impact. Then they discover that expression is managed through templates and enthusiasm is graded by tone, not ideas. According to recent findings, 54% of Americans say the fear of layoffs significantly heightens their stress, even in supposedly stable environments. That constant fear acts like a low-grade fever. You might not collapse, but you never recover. The message is clear: stay busy, keep visible, don't let anyone see you doubt the mission. Inside open-plan offices and remote dashboards, that pressure becomes ritual. People perform productivity, green dots online, instant replies, copied supervisors in every email chain. All of it reinforces the illusion that busyness equals safety. But what it really produces is quiet panic. The knowledge that your relevance depends on appearing irreplaceable in a machine built to replace you. Under that tension, humor fades, collaboration turns defensive, and trust evaporates. Everyone smiles through teeth they're grinding. The emotional fallout of useless work resembles grief. You mourn the loss of purpose, though no one around you acknowledges it. You look at spreadsheets that once symbolized progress and feel nothing. Meetings turn into background static. It's not laziness, it's learned futility. When outcomes never connect to effort, the brain adapts by switching off motivation pathways. You stop caring because caring hurts. It's a logical response to an illogical system. Some workers externalize the burnout through rebellion, quiet quitting, disengagement, gentle underperformance. But even these small protests get pathologized. Management frames detachment as laziness, not as feedback on structural dysfunction. People end up feeling defective for responding rationally to a system desecrating their time. The phrase quiet quitting itself blames the individual for withdrawing from meaningless labor instead of blaming leadership for creating it. It's gaslighting at scale. This gaslight seeps into identity. Work has long been a pillar of self-definition, a story you tell about who you are. When that story collapses, when you realize you're optimizing spreadsheets that vanish into digital dust, you lose more than motivation. You lose narrative coherence. The "who am I?" once answered by job titles dissolves, replaced with anxious humor about just paying the bills. That joke is coping, not apathy. It's how people hide existential despair behind a Slack emoji. The mental health implications are measurable. Research links job insecurity to triple the likelihood of depression among young adults. Anxiety spikes, sleep quality plummets, relationships strain. You start carrying work home. Not the tasks, but the emptiness. It follows you into dinner conversations, manifests as irritability or numbness. Even weekends stop feeling restorative because anticipation of Monday's pointlessness overshadows rest. This is work's cruelest transformation, from economic necessity to emotional parasite. And yet, society frames this suffering as personal weakness. We reward perseverance under absurd conditions, calling it professionalism. People brag about powering through burnout, as if endurance and futility were noble. The more someone tolerates meaninglessness, the more leadership calls them resilient. It's exploitation cloaked as virtue. The fact that employees struggle to feel proud of useless labor isn't pathology. It's psychological integrity fighting back. Within organizations, this conflict becomes invisible because it's inconvenient. Admitting demoralization would expose structural rot. So corporations run wellness seminars and mindfulness sessions instead, soothing symptoms without touching cause. Take deep breaths replaces take less nonsense. Every initiative to improve mental health becomes another layer of self-blame. If breathing exercises don't fix your despair, maybe the problem is you. Thus, the hamster wheel spins with scented candles. Meanwhile, technology amplifies the anxiety. Performance software monitors keystrokes, status updates, and virtual presence. You're told it ensures fairness, but it breeds surveillance fatigue. Workers live in digital glass cages, performing activity to prove existence. Even solitude becomes data. Human beings evolve under conditions of trust and feedback, not tracking and suspicion. Replace mentorship with metrics, and you breed paranoia instead of purpose. Imagine the absurdity of it on a human level. Millions logging hours on tasks they privately know are pointless, congratulating each other in meetings designed to revive belief. That forced enthusiasm is emotional labor, smiling through futility. Over time, the mask adheres to your skin. You forget what genuine engagement feels like. Psychologists studying occupational stress describe this as identity hijacking, where role performance consumes self-perception. You adapt to emptiness by calling it stability. But there's a breaking point. It arrives quietly, maybe during a routine check-in, or after yet another urgent project dissolves into management silence. You look at your screen and feel the strange combination of exhaustion and liberation that comes from realizing it's not you. The inefficiency isn't your fault, and the gloom isn't burnout, it's clarity. You've seen behind the curtain, and what's back there isn't chaos or mystery. It's mediocrity dressed as leadership. That realization is both crushing and freeing. Crushing because it invalidates years of effort, freeing because it hands back perspective. You understand that your drained spirit isn't evidence of incompetence, but rebellion against absurdity. You stop confusing survival instinct with loyalty. That's when the guilt begins to fade. You're not broken. The environment is. The irony is that once people accept this, productivity often spikes briefly before departure. Liberated from guilt, they perform sharper work, not to prove worth, but to create closure. Then they leave, taking with them the rare sense of authenticity corporate structures can't replicate. Each exit is a quiet protest, a data point in an unspoken revolution against meaningless labor. This crisis of meaning is reshaping entire generations. Gen Z and millennials talk openly about mental health, boundaries, and purpose because they've lived through the psychological garbage fire of pretending their value equals their visibility. They're not disengaged, they're defiant. They refuse to glorify exhaustion as purpose. And that defiance scares leadership that survives on compliance. So if you've ever felt fraudulent for dreading work that adds no value, you're not weak, you're awake. The panic, the cynicism, the emptiness are rational signals from a mind demanding integrity. And as more workers reach that breaking clarity, the facade of corporate meaning strains under its own weight. The next section confronts how that strain is weaponized, how leadership uses fear itself to keep you compliant, convinced that replaceability is motivation, when it's really control. Because once you see fear as a management tool, the illusion of necessity begins to unravel. Section 6. Why leadership keeps you feeling replaceable. Here's the cruel twist of modern leadership. It survives by keeping everyone beneath it anxious. The easiest worker to control isn't the loyal one, it's the scared one. Fear keeps you productive in appearances, cooperative in meetings, and quiet about inefficiency. Making people feel replaceable isn't a flaw in the system, it's the operating model.